So mitering a perfect corner in applique. Well, that can be kind of challenging if you want it to look really, really good. So we're going to explore some options today. And even if you are not an applique person, we're going to go through quite a few controls that we have to organize a stitch, modify it, repeat it. I think you might be surprised all the different things you can do with both utility and decorative stitches. And you'll get some pretty good corners too. I'm Cathy, this is Sewing Tech Talk, and let's dive into tapering corners and making them beautiful. So now let's dive into a lot of the things we can do with our utility and decorative stitches. And I'm kind of putting this all on doing a perfect mitered corner because it's a great way to kind of explore some of the different functions that we have, the way we can modify stitches. I think you might be surprised. Now, I have made this cute little wall hanging. In fact, I'm almost done with it because I had a whole bunch of scraps and I thought it would be a cute way to practice some of these applique corners. And in my handout, and I have a handout for all of my different videos, I'm giving you the dimensions of this little wall hanging here. I think it looks kind of cute and modern. Great way to use up scraps and a super great way to practice your applique corners. I'm also in the handout showing you all the different methods that I'm talking about and pictures and identifying all the different buttons. So if you don't take notes, you should be pretty much good to go if you go ahead and print out the handout. It's usually highlighted in blue below and it takes you to a page where all of my handouts are. So that way you can just sit back, pop some popcorn and enjoy the show. So now there's three ways I'm going to go through and to do a mitered corner. One of them is super quick and it's not the perfect corner. The second one is kind of a lot slower and more tedious, but it does give you really good results. And there's another way you can use your decorative stitches to kind of almost pre-program a corner, and that's kind of fun. But along the way, we're going to learn where a lot of our different decorative stitch controls and functions are on the Baby Lock Altair. Now, the Altair is pretty much a top-of-the-line sewing and embroidery machine. You can also get the Altair in like a sewing-only version. And then the top of the line, the Solaris, well, that has even more features. But this will work, all of these buttons work the same. If the machine has that feature, it's going to be the same. So let's dive in. Let me tell you my setup first and foremost. What I have is I have my Sew Steady table on the machine. That gives me a nice flat surface to work on. And you can get this Sew Steady table either as the table alone. You can also get a package that has the glider and even like a circle sewing, a whole bunch of different accessories. I like the glider because it comes off, it's like sticky, it kind of sticks on, doesn't hurt the table, but it gives you a really smooth surface for your project to flow. Actually, it has lines as well. We'll be using the LED guide light, but you can set up this glider to really extend that line out and actually give you two different lines if you ever need two different lines. I'm also using the Ultra T High Performance feet. We're going to be dealing with a J-foot. No, I lied. I'm sorry. We're going to be using the in foot when we're sewing our satin stitch today. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But the set comes with the J foot, which is for your standard sewing, the in foot for your satin stitches and decorative stitches, and a 1/4 inch feet. So I've already installed that on the machine. Also, you're going to want a practice sample. You're going to want to practice this corner technique and some of these other techniques just to see. When we get to the part where we're going to put the stitch together to see how it's going to length, we're going to make sure it's a guaranteed length. You're definitely going to want to practice to see if your setup gives you the length that you're shooting for. So I just put some squares on a little piece of fabric. Make sure it's as close to your project as you can. Mine happens to be on some batting and with a little bit of stabilizer on the back, and I just have some squares on there. Now to make this little quilt, like I said, the dimensions are in the handout. It's really just 3.5 inch squares sewn together, and I'm appliquing some 3.5 inch squares on the top. When I get done, and they're randomly placed. That gives it that modern look. And then I have that square in the center, and I think that's kind of fun. I've also added squares to the corners right here, and it kind of gives it that fun look. I'm using up a bunch of scraps. So enough yamma yamma. Let's get into the part where we're going to do a real quick, fun way to miter a corner. And you might be surprised that you can use a control on the machine that you may have never dived into before. So now this corner is the quickest, fastest, and easiest. It's not necessarily the absolute perfect corner. We're going to do that one next. But here's what we can do. On the machine, if you look at the utility stitch menu, they have all different choices, and you have multiple different zigzag stitches. And of course you can modify those to get a satin stitch, which is a closer stitch length and gets the stitch closer. So that looks like this. When I take the length down, the stitch gets closer and closer and closer together. So for applique, I'm going to use a stitch with very close stitch length that gives me that nice full coverage. Now, there it is. Kind of what you see is what you get. I can go a little bit closer, and that just depends on your thread. If you have a thicker thread, you're going to want a longer stitch length. Now that I'm here, I'm going to pick the stitch, and I hope you can see that. That's the stitch that's 111 or 112. Why is that different than 109 or 110? Can you see on the top, excuse me, how it gets, when you make it smaller, it gets smaller to the one side. And that kind of can give me that mitered corner. So if I take this stitch to the very smallest it can be, and I hope you can see, in fact, I'm going to bring up my LED guide light, and I'm going to put it right next to the side of the stitch, and I hope you can see. Now when I make this stitch bigger, it's going to be bigger to the one side and not to the other. Hold on, let me put this over here so that you can see. Now, when I make it bigger, see how it's getting bigger to the one side and it's not getting bigger evenly? That's the kind of key. So either one of these stitches will do, and I can pick that one if I want to have it come out that way and put my LED guide light right on the side. Now, here's the other really cool trick. If I'm making this stitch bigger like I just did, I was pushing this button, wasn't I? Well, if I want to have a nice mitered corner, what's going to happen is I'm going to want the stitches to come out really fast. And I don't want to stop and be touching that button. That's why this is the fastest one, because I can come to my settings and I can use the slider on the machine. This is the slider up top. And what that is, it traditionally slows down the very top speed of the machine. So if you want to stitch slow and low, you're going to slide this off to the left and the machine's only going to go slow. If you want to go the full 1050 stitches a minute, you turn it up to the top speed and you're controlling it with your foot, but that gives you the full range of motion. But I want to use something physical instead of having to stop and touch the buttons to change the width of the stitch, and I totally can. So when I come to width control and I turn it on, that means that now this slider is going to change the width of the stitch. So when I move the slider to the left, that makes the stitch as narrow as it can be. When I push it to the right, that makes it as wide as it can be. So I hope you can see, you can do this mitered corner, making the stitch bigger. All you have to do is slide that slider as you stitch. It's pretty cool. So here's my little sample. I put some red thread in the machine so that you can see, and I'm just going to stitch right here. Now, you have to coordinate how fast the machine's going with how fast you're sliding it. It's going to take a little bit of practice. But if you're doing a whole bunch of different stuff and it doesn't have to be that perfect corner, this is going to be okay. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to have my hand on the slider. I'm going to start the machine. We're going to start small and we're going to go big. See if I can do it. Now I did it a couple times and let's see what that stitch looks like. Oh my gosh! Do you see how the stitch got wider and then it got narrower? Now that could be my mitered corner. If I'd stopped with the needle on the outside edge, I could turn around, come off here, and I have a pretty fast and quick mitered corner. But it's not necessarily perfect, and it depends on your skill set. So let's try something else, and I hope to show you some of the other really cool functions of the machine. So now we're going to leave this behind. We're going to come off, turn that off. Okay. Now let's take our traditional zigzag. Now this is our traditional zigzag. We're going to make it into a satin stitch, which means we're going to bring that stitch length in closer so that these stitches are close and we get good coverage on the edge of our applique. And I also want to change the width of it, depending on the width that I want to have my stitch finish up. And I recommend you do that, you play with that to see what a good length and width is for your project. But I'm just going to do my little corner. So let me show you how I do that. And don't forget, all of this is in your handout. So I'm going to change the length to make it a satin stitch. 4 is going to be okay. And I'm going to take it to the narrowest that it can be. You can actually take it down to 0, which is a straight stitch, but I want to start with 1/2 millimeter. Now, here's my cool trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the machine I only want it to stitch a single stitch at a time, and I want to push it all the way over to the extreme left of the sewing field. So by touching this button with the 1 star, I have just one little tiny stitch. But I want to move it over to the left. And I have this really cool feature called left-right shift. So to move it over, I'm going to touch this, move it all the way over to the left, and let's put that guide light on too so that you can see. I'm going to move it all the way over to the left as well. All right. Now, that means when I'm taking a single stitch, what's going to happen? It's going to make this stitch and then stop. Then I'm going to increase it and move it over, increase it and move it over. Well, let me show you how that works. So I'm going to start by putting my little piece of fabric sample underneath the foot. Oops, easy for me to say. Lower that presser foot and get the very corner of my applique under there. Now these squares are going to be fused down, and so they're not going to move around on you. And I think I moved that LED guide light a little too far to the left. Let me put it right along the edge. I can see that on the fabric, and I can also see that on the screen. Perfect. Now, when I press the power pedal, I'm going to get one stitch that's really tiny. It's right along the corner of my applique. That wasn't very exciting, was it? But now let's take one that's a little bit bigger. How do we do that? Well, we just move that over 1 and increase the size by 1/2 millimeter. Take another stitch. So can you see how I'm kind of leapfrogging between the two? It does take a little bit, but it gives you that perfect mitered corner. I'm going to keep going and toggling between left-right shift and increasing the width of the stitch. It's going to keep it along that outside edge, and it's going to give me that perfect mitered corner. I got all the way up to a 7 millimeter width, and I did it one stitch at a time. Now I want to finish my applique, don't I? So all I have to do is tell the machine, I don't want one stitch at a time, I just want you to keep stitching. And it's just the press of a button. Now let's rock and roll. I'm going to put my speed lever up if I want to get some action. Now before I come to the end, I'm going to take it out so that you can see. Take a look at this. Isn't that the perfect mitered corner? Now, if that's a little bit long, if you want it to be a little bit more shallow than that, you can go click, stitch, and make it a little bit shorter. If you do a little bit of practice, you can get the absolute perfect mitered corner. Does it take a little bit of time? Well, sure. Don't forget, you also have the quick method using your finger. Now, let's go over to decorative stitch land, because there's a bunch of different stuff I want to show you there. But remember, you can use your LED guide light in utility stitches. You can put these stitches in the memory of the machine. You can go up one stitch at a time. You can have all kinds of controls in your utility stitches. But in decorative stitches, there's more decorative stitches and there's a lot more controls. So let's go to the land of decorative stitches and we'll create a stitch that's exactly the length that we want. So now I'm going to leave the land of utility stitches by touching character decorative stitch. Is that what I wanted to do? Absolutely. Now you have different lands of stitches, including alphabets. And what you have on the side here is all those controls. So when I select a stitch, what's going to happen is they're going to light up. Now, in your handout, I found a couple stitches that kind of work for me to do a mitered corner. So I start in this is the land, which is the land, the 9th little different settings. And all the stitches start with 9. Let me return. So if I return, you can see there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The number of the stitch starts with that. So these are all the stitches in the 9th category. And what I want is, I've decided on stitch number 920. And there it is. And it's going to repeat it for me. Now, all the stitches in here have the ability to be elongated. And if you see down here in the lower right-hand corner, this stitch can be changed. I'm going to touch the elongation key. See how it gets longer? And then all of a sudden it gets shorter. I want the number 1. Check. And I don't want it quite that wide, so I can do all kinds of modifications. Do I want just 1? Well, you know how to do that now. There we go. Now I want to add another stitch. That's kind of my mitered corner. Now, some of these other stitches, they might work for you and your project. But I'm going to add another stitch by touching the plus, and I'm even going to go to a different land, which is land number 8. Now, I chose this stitch right here, 809. And do you see how it added another stitch to the edge of that? That's pretty cool, right? Now, when I just keep touching it, what's going to happen, it's going to keep adding those stitches. And I hope you can see what I can get is I can get a stitch that's almost exactly the length that I'm shooting for on my little project. Now, you're going to want to create this and then practice stitch it out, because depending on the thickness of your fabric, depending on the setup of your machine, it might stitch a little bit longer. It might stitch a little bit shorter if there's more resistance. Remember, you want to set up the machine for as little resistance as possible so this can flow beautifully underneath. Now, let me show you this trick. Do you see how I have this stitch and I have it set up? For all of the stitches in this land, the land number 8, I actually also have an automatic super satin stitch setting. Now, this gets the stitch really, really, really compact. And I'll hold it up so that you can see. It gives you a really cool raised effect. Now, you may or may not want that really cool raised effect. It could be beautiful if you're doing some sort of fabric embellishment or you want to do something that really stands out. For my project, I don't think I want it, but I want you to know it's there. Now, here's something that I'm not going to use on my project, but I want to show you anyway. You also have other controls when you're adding stitches to this. So if you want to take a decorative stitch and you want to, well, let me show you. So if I have my stitches coming down like this, if I touch one of these buttons here, that adds the next stitch out to the side. Next stitch out to the side. Next stitch over to the left. Can you see the really cool effects that you can get? Now, I don't want these in my stitch, but I wanted to show you they were there. And they're there for all of the different decorative stitches that you have. So you can use that feature to create something really pretty amazing. So I'm going to delete those stitches. And I'm going to keep adding stitches until I get it something about the length that I want. Let's say that that's it. Now I want to add that final little mitered corner, and I just go back and add that other stitch. I go return, go to the land here, I pick, oops, that's not where I wanted to go. It was right here, wasn't it? Pick that one right there, and that doesn't look right at all, does it? Now I can flip it and I can mirror image it. And you can see I'm kind of starting to get something that's going to work for my mitered corners. Now I'm going to practice stitching out to see if it works, but let's see all the different controls that I have. I can bring up my LED guide light and put it right along the side. You also even have quick access to go to the left or the right by touching that button right there. So you can go really, really quickly. The other thing that I can do is I can, of course, shift this stitch if it works for me, or I can use the beginning of my glider to see and get a really good idea that I'm going straight when I'm doing my stitch. So there's lots of different choices that you have when you're doing and manipulating your decorative stitches. So let me check this one out. I kind of don't know if it's going to work. Looks like it's going to be way too long. So let's modify it out. Let's go delete, delete, bring this one back, fix it, and that looks like it might be good, because you see how I can hold the item up to the screen? What you see is kind of what you get. Now if the stitch is way too long, well, you have another way to visualize it. By touching this up here, that brings up the stitch in the actual size, and if it's a really big stitch, that's really super helpful. You want to magnify it, you can see it really close and see exactly what you did. You can even change the color if that's really helpful. Okay. Now I'm going to practice this stitch. Oh, I don't want it in red, I want it in black. Now, the other thing that you can do is once you practice this stitch and you get it to where you exactly want it, you can put this combination of stitches into the memory of the machine. Let me show you how to do that, because it's kind of a special place to retrieve it. When I want to put this stitch into the memory of the machine, I touch the memory key. And I can save it to the memory of the machine, but I could also save it to a USB stick if I chose. That might be helpful if you're putting a project away and you want to make sure you know exactly what stitch you modified to do all those appliques. Let's save it to the memory of the machine. And I've already done that, but let me show you how I'm going to get that out. When I hit return and I go to the home page of all of the decorative stitches, I have this little pocket down here. That means I can pull it out of the memory of the machine, or I can pull it out of any of the pockets on the USB that I might have saved it to. So let's pull it out. There are my saved stitches now. This is the one I did before. Let's bring that one up. And I can touch this icon here to bring it out. If I don't like it, I have a trash can and I can just throw it away. So let's bring up this one. And oh, look, it combined it to the other ones. Now that's good to know, isn't it? You can bring up a stitch, you can do something, you can combine everything, you can put it in the memory, and you can put a whole bunch of them together. I don't want to put it next to that other one, so let me get rid of it. Just play, and you're going to discover all different things that you can do. Here's a, whoa, let's stitch this and I'll show you one more thing. All right, let's see if this works. I have a feeling it might be too big, but we'll see. So I'm lining it up and I'm going to go on the right-hand side. Remember, you can mirror image those miters to make them be wherever you want them to be. All right, let's engage that light, and here we go. All right, so I didn't start at exactly the best place, but it is a little bit too long. So basically what I would do is I would take maybe one of those units out. I could also increase the stitch length or decrease it to see if then it would fit. So you have lots of different ways to adjust this stitch. Now for this, This one is a little bit time consuming at first, but once you get the perfect results, you're rocking and rolling. So remember, you can do a really quick, fast one because you can use that slider for the satin stitch and all of the different utility stitches. You can move it for the stitch position of a straight stitch. It's really amazing. It's on the fly that you can move it. You can also do the absolute perfect mitered corner, one stitch at a time, if that project just has to be perfect. And you can combine stitches and using all kinds of features of the machine to actually program it, and then you can just sit back with a tall, cool one and just be stitching your edge of your applique. Well, maybe not that relaxed, but it's pretty easy once you get everything set up. Don't forget, you have a handout that takes you through all these different scenarios, shows you the settings that I used, if that helps you for yours. But remember, your project might be different than mine, so get in there and play. I want to send it off to George. He's going to tell you a little bit more about the Altair. Remember, it's a sewing machine, an awesome sewing machine. And it's also a pretty amazing embroidery machine too. Take it away, George, and tell him a little bit about the Baby Lock Altair.
Thanks, Cathy. As usual, that was an incredible presentation. The Baby Lock Altair is dollar for dollar the most advanced machine in the industry. It has a large 9.5 by 14-inch embroidery area, plus 494 built-in beautiful designs, 30 of the most amazing fonts that you can arc and ray and edit, plus many large, beautiful monograms. You have the ability to create a design without a computer. With the IQ Designer, you can take an image from a phone, send it to a machine, and it turns into beautiful embroidery instantly. You also have an automatic applique creator to create great borders around names and other embroidery designs. Plus, of course, we love our never miss needle threader, and it also cuts all the jump stitches that you want. Now, it's not just for embroidery. This is an incredible machine with an 11.25-inch opening. It also has a automatic fabric sensor. This fabric sensor senses heavy fabric like denim and sews automatically from there. It will also sew on lighter fabric like tricot. It will sew elastic. It's incredible. Now, for the real difficult fabric and for quilting, it has a digital dual feed with a belt system that controls all fabrics perfectly. It also has a laser guide, so you can guide for that perfect seam allowance. It's incredible. As I mentioned, this is dollar for dollar the most advanced machine in the industry. We have a special package right now. The total package value is $14,999, but we have it on sale for $8,999. We're offering free shipping across the country, as well as we have interest-free payments of under $188 a month. But that's not all. We have a special bonus for a limited time, and while supplies last, we're including 63 spools of beautiful embroidery thread, 2 separate design collections by Anita Good Design, which has over 600 design files in all different styles. We're including stabilizer, all kinds of needles, bobbins, and a membership to Love of Knowledge. We're here, you're going to see all kinds of demonstrations and techniques on the Baby Lock Altair and other sewing techniques. This is for a limited time, but I also mentioned we have interest-free payments. Now, for those who don't want to finance, we have even a better bonus. So give us a call at 1-800-865-9664 or click on the link to order today. Bye for now.